his, her ladyship, Justice Aisha Malik, whether the term law occurring in Article 191 Constitution 1973 includes acts of parliament, whether the term law occurring in Article 191 itself confers legislative competence and or requires legislative competence to be based on some other provision of the Constitution and or legislative entity in the fourth schedule. If the Parliament has the power to enact such a law, then what are the limitations of such a law? My Lord, if your Lordships may turn to the third page of the brief note which I've given your Lordship, and the heading is B, where I deal with this question. Now, my Lord, the term subject to. Now, question has occurred and repeatedly been asked, is this conferment or is this restriction? What I would be submitting before your Lordship is that it is both. It has two parts, subject to and law. So subject to restricts and law confers. Now, let me first clear I think it is a confusion which has occurred whether the term law as used in Article 191 means or includes acts of parliament or not. My Lord, in order to understand this, my Lord, let us first go to the Supreme Court rules and let us examine how the Supreme Court, full court in 1980 which sat, looked at this term law, and the answer lies in that. If I may take your Lordships to the Supreme Court rules, Order 11, which is the critical section dealing with the Chief Justice being the master of the roster. How did they understand this term law? If your Lordships have Order 11, my Lords. If I may read, and I'll only read the first line, critical line, save as otherwise provided by law or by these rules. Now, your Lordship may notice the language in this. Save as otherwise, critical word, otherwise, provided by law. My Lord, a bare reading of this provision shows that one is envisaging some kind of statutory law. And I will come to the words otherwise later. Otherwise indicates that if law here refers to act, there may be some other arrangement in some other statute.
Subject to otherwise provided by law what? पूरा पढ़िए ना इसको.
By law.
No, kindly read the whole.
Save as otherwise provided by law and by these rules, or every cause.
Or by these rules. Or by these.
Or by these rules, every cause, appeal or matter shall be heard and disposed of by a bench consisting of not less than 3 judges to be nominated by the Supreme Court.
Well, this goes to the of the bench, not who is to sit on the bench.
Sir, I'm not coming to, I'm simply saying, how do we understand this term law, which occurs in Article 191? An indication of that is given in this order. This clearly implies some kind of statutory law, and I'll come to the words otherwise later when I examine what is the relationship between rules and act. Now, to further clarify that the word law must include an act of parliament, there is a definition section in this Supreme Court rules. Now, your Lordship may kindly come to that. If your Lordships may kindly see Order 2.
Mr. Siddiqui,
yes,
the question was that if it is only to be an act of parliament, then the Constitution might have used the word act of parliament, not that the word law includes act of parliament. The whole issue was that subject to law, law is a very broad term,
Yes.
includes many things,
Yes.
including an act of parliament.
Yes.
And the Attorney General said that we should read into the word law the fact that it's just an act of parliament. Hence the issue as to how to read the word law.
I'm
आप जो बहस कर रहे हैं कि लॉ में एक्ट ऑफ पार्लियामेंट है वो तो अंडरस्टूड है, सिर्फ ये है कि टू द एक्सक्लूजन ऑफ एवरीथिंग एल्स हम इसको लॉ में पढ़ेंगे.
the exclusion argue नहीं कर रहा हूं, and the reason I am trying to clarify so that there is no confusion is to come to my argument about conferment under Article 190. If I may just make one point on this.
You see, there are two issues
Yes,
here.
yes.
I interject now.
Ji.
I'm here to hear you. Please conclude your submissions. If someone wants to ask a question, if you start responding to each query, I don't even know what your argument is. And I would request the honorable members of the bench to at least let counsel complete his submission. Yes, there will be questions, but I don't know what you're going to say next. And if you are faced with questions, I mean, I don't know what I'm to write, and I just lose the chain of thought, and I'm sure you do as well. So, Mr. Siddiqui, please, if you keep responding to each question, we'll be forever. No, excuse me, this is no laughing matter.
My Lord,
No, from morning to night on the first day we worked, every second of this court is time of the people who have invested heavily in this institution. 3 full days have worked. Now we are on the 4th day. We can endlessly hear one case in the year, and that's our performance. And all the other cases will get left behind, and all mounting up. So please, there are 15 of us, and all of us have questions, and undoubtedly valid questions. Please complete your chain of thought, and if you keep responding, I don't know what your contention is, I will never understand it.
if I may just complete this.
Please keep submitting
If I
your
may just,
submissions.
I'm very grateful to your Lordship. If your Lordships may see Order 1, it contains various definitions, my Lord, and then your Lordship may see subsection 2. If I may read. Unless the context, now law is not defined in Supreme Court rules, but this provision is there. Unless the context otherwise requires, the General Clauses Act 1897 shall apply to the interpretation of these rules, as it applies to the interpretation of a federal act. Your Lordships are aware that the term law is a defined term in the General Clauses Act. And this is the General Clauses Act 1897 I'm talking about. If your Lordship looks at section 3, subsection, sorry sir.
Order 1, 2, 2 है ना, जरा clear कर.
जी जी.
Order 1 का rule 2 का 2.
जी, rule 2.
जी.
Rule 2 का 2.
जी जी. जी, rule 2 का 2. I'm sorry sir. So the definition of what law means in Order 11 would come from the General Clauses Act. And Section 3, subsection 37B has a definition of law. It says Pakistani law, but the case law consistently says where the term law means Pakistani law, that is what Pakistani law is. And it says Pakistani law shall mean any act, ordinance, regulation, rule, order, bylaw.
Please tell us where you're reading from.
Sir, section 3, subsection.
Sections तो नहीं है.
Sir, General Clauses Act 1897.
अच्छा, we are still at the rules, जी.
Sir, rule तो मैंने आपको बता दिया. Order 1, sub rule 2. अगर आप General Clauses Act देख लें अब, section 3, subsection 37B.
Pakistani law.
So there is, as the Supreme Court which sat while making these rules was clear in their minds.
It says Pakistan law.
Yes, and the case law says that where the word law comes, instead, and I've given the citations, I won't repeat them, that Pakistani law's definition is to be used. I've cited that. So, my lord, there is no There is no doubt about the fact that when the word
This is the book that I
मुझे नहीं
have,
मिल रहा है,
subsection,
निकाल के देना।
there's a note here saying that this was substituted in 1981.
Ji. Sir, 37B.
Yes,
It was
yes.
substituted in 1981, what you are reading. So when the full court sat to frame the rules in Supreme Court Rules 1980, what was 37B then?
But it would still apply.
No, but what was it?
I'm not aware of that, but
Check.
yes.
Fine, check.
So my submission before your lordship is that even if one looks at the structure of the sentence, save as otherwise provided by law, the contemplation mind of even while framing the rules is that there can be an act of parliament. Now, what is the relationship between that act of parliament and the rules? That is a crucial question. But there can be no question about the fact that rules, act of parliament can be on practice and procedure of the Supreme Court.
No, it can't.
So that's my first point.
No, just a moment.
Ji,
You
sir.
First of all, you are asking us to read a definition which does not say law but says Pakistani law in the specific context of Article 191 and the Supreme Court rules. Chalo, okay, that's your argument. But you say that law.
I don't know what you say. I still have to note it. Can you please complete your thought? So let me understand what you're saying. So then the question, I will understand the question also. If you're not so quick at understanding, can you please complete your submissions from your own mouth? Let us hear it.
My submission is that the word,
Let me first ask up to whatever you said
Please,
now.
can you, I don't know the question has to follow a submission. Please,
is a
can you
submission.
conclude your submission, Mr. Faisal Siddiqui? Otherwise, we'll have to spend forever on this case.
sir, may
आप जरा अपना conclude कर लें submissions.
I just, thank you, sir, thank you. Sir, my
I
submission.
can't follow what you're
Yes,
saying.
Sir, my submission is that the word law, as it occurs in Article 191, includes acts of parliament. And an indication of that, a clear indication of that is given in the rules as framed in 1980, because the language, for example, used in Order 11 talks about save as otherwise provided by law. That clearly indicates that one is talking about statutory law.
Okay, next point.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
just before you
And
carry on,
that of course is buttressed by the definition.
Just before you
Ji-
carry on
ji-
to
ji,
your
sir,
next point,
ji.
I think, if I may ask, in the 1956 Constitution, you will recall that there was a specific article which said that words and phrases not defined in the Constitution shall have the same meaning as in the General Clauses Act.
Yes.
That was in the 1956 Constitution. Is there any equivalent in the 1973 Constitution? As far as I can
I
remember,
don't-
Mr. Faisal
I-
Siddiqui, you have
I'm
been
not
right.
aware of it.
You have been rightly
But
stumped.
therefore-
Please persist
Therefore,
with your submissions.
Therefore, my question to you is that here we have to look at the word law as used in Article 191, because the rule-making power is conferred by Article 191. So any definition, anything that goes in the Supreme Court Rules 1980 has to be consistent with the language of Article 191.
I'll come to that. My short answer.
You focus on that.
Yes.
What does law mean over
Yes.
there?
My short answer to that.
I think council.
Sir, I'll just complete
no,
my
I
submission.
think council is entitled to argue any which way they want to.
Achha.
Let us hear you.
Yes.
I have to hear you decide what you say. And if we have already formed opinions, we can reflect them in our judgments. Please
Not a
continue,
question-
otherwise we
I'm sorry,
will
this is
never
not a question
conclude
of
these
forming an
hearings.
opinion. This is a question that as a judge of the court sitting on this bench, I'm entitled to
Of
ask
course,
counsel.
ask it. Let
So
the
I'm
council
asking the
finish
coun-
his submissions.
If I'm interrupted all the time, I'm sorry to say, sir, that is not proper.
I think the
I'm
interruption
asking-
is of
I'm
learned
asking-
council.
I'm
Chale
asking
learned council, aap aage बढ़ें.
I'm asking counsel a question, which is my right to ask the counsel. If he wants to answer
After
it,
he
doesn't
concludes
answer
his
it,
submissions with
if
the
he
greatest
wants to
of
or
respect.
doesn't want to, that's his issue. That's not my issue. You understood the question now?
My lord, I'll answer that question. Let me just finish this submissions on competence and then I'll address this question. My lord, so I think there can be no doubt about what the word law means in Article 191 in the context type. But if your lordship requires a constitutional context, then subject to law also occurs in the constitution. It has been interpreted by your lordships of what that means. And that has been interpreted as meaning an act of parliament. A recent judgment on this is a judgment authored by Justice Mansoor Ali Shah Sahab in the extension case, which is PLD 2020 Supreme Court, page 1. And your lordships are aware, if your lordships look at 243, sub-article 3, which contained the same language, although subject to law was not in the beginning but in the middle. The President, subject to law. And His Lordship Justice Mansoor Ali Shah in para 27 of that judgment said this means an act of parliament. So then another judgment, my lord, on this would be the Baskakar case. Now, if your lordship, as your
What
lordships
case?
are aware,
Baskakar.
Ji,
Baskakar.
Baskakar.
Okay.
Whether law has been defined in the Constitution?
No, no. Existing law has been defined.
Kindly see 260.
Federal law is also.
Federal law has been defined.
Ji, law has not been defined. Existing
Federal law
law.
has been
Ji, federal law has
Siddiqui
been
Sahab, please
When-
continue your arguments.
When 191 says of a law, does it talk of existing law or does it include a law that subsequently may be legislated?
It cannot talk about existing law because existing law is a defined term in the Constitution under Article 260. And that is a reference to Article 268, sub-article 7. So when existing law is used, it's a defined term in the
Okay,
Constitution.
so where it is defined, then the Constitution must have used the term existing law somewhere.
Yes, in
Where is that?
260.
No, no, वो तो
It is in
defined हुई है
260.
ना?
It is in 260.
Other than the
260
definition, where in what articles, what other articles has this term been used?
It is being used in 268. It has been defined and used in that.
सुप्रीम कोर्ट में प्रैक्टिस एंड प्रोसीजर एक्ट के खिलाफ दरखास्तों की समाअत जारी। चीफ जस्टिस काजी फायज ईसा की सरबराही में फुल कोर्ट समाअत कर रहा है। फैसला आज मुतवक्किल।
चेयरमैन पीटीआई को